A gluten-free lifestyle. As more and more people become gluten intolerant, I'm in discussion with a gluten-free trendsetter here in Bangkok. Anne Somanas is consulting hotels and restaurants on gluten-free dining and has built a community of followers. We're at the Divine, the Siam, a luxurious hotel on Bangkok's riverside, and you are watching a tasty episode of Trends.
Hi, David.
Hello, Anne. Tell us, why should we go gluten-free in our diet?
Sure. There is a good reason to go gluten-free, even if it's a bit difficult right now because there aren't as many options for people who want to go gluten-free, especially in Southeast Asia. But primarily because a lot of people feel better on a gluten-free diet. They feel lighter, they experience less bloating, sleepiness. They feel a lot more alert with gluten.
And I know that we've all heard about gluten-free, but what actually is gluten?
That's such a good question, David, because there's so many misconceptions about what gluten is. When I tell people gluten-free, a lot of times they think I can't have cow's milk, I've even got garlic, for example. It's confused with a lot of things. What is gluten? Gluten is the largest protein that we consume in our diets. It is found in certain grains, including wheat, barley, rye, couscous, bulgur, but the most common is wheat, especially in Thailand. We're not finding rye or barley as often. And the fact that it's a very large protein, it also contributes to the fact that a lot of people have trouble digesting it. It is actually what gives bread its stretchy and stringy texture. When you bite into a large chunk of sourdough, for example, and you're enjoying that, soft chewiness, that is the gluten.
Does rice have gluten?
Rice does not have gluten.
Right.
And also glutinous rice does not have gluten.
Wow. Now, you started a gluten-free movement in Thailand, initially with a tasty bakery enterprise, and now you moved on to consulting hotels and restaurants with gluten-free dishes and menus. Can you tell us about this movement and this group that you have? I know on social media that you've got a big following.
Sure, David. So I'm a community builder. I've built a lot of different communities. When I discovered that I was gluten intolerant about 10 years ago, I found myself reaching out for resources here in Thailand. I looked on the internet, I searched for gluten-free blogs, and I found out that most of them were outdated. Many of them were started by people who lived here at one point and had left. They had not been updated in 3 to 4 years. And I realized there was a real need for a real-time updated source. And I thought, what better way than to crowdsource? Because sometimes if we all share our knowledge, someone can answer a question that someone else can't. So I started a group on Facebook called Free From Foods Thailand to accommodate everyone who has food allergies, but primarily gluten-free people. And now the community has grown to over 2,000 people in just 2 short years.
You've now moved on to consulting hotels and restaurants. What does that service entail?
Sure. So after I started the group, I had a lot of people approaching me and telling me that it was so helpful to have this source, because not only did I curate a group of members who are knowledgeable or living the gluten-free lifestyle, I also made a map of places all over Thailand that have gluten-free options. So whether you're in Bangkok, in Phuket, in Chiang Mai, Hua Hin, Samui, we have options to share. Especially for travelers coming through Thailand, this has been very useful for them. But I'm actually a hospitality journalist. That's my other hat. So I report about travel trade, as you know. And I had the chance to stay at a lot of different hotels, visit a lot of restaurants for my work, to write reviews. And I was finding that even among five-star hotels, sometimes there's still confusion. Like what I mentioned before, gluten-free is confused with dairy-free. It's confused with soy-free, garlic-free, even vegan or vegetarian.
Lactose intolerant.
Correct.
I often get confused with gluten-free.
And they're two very distinct intolerances or allergies. And I found that there's no real infrastructure to help entrepreneurs or F&B owners who want to accommodate these people. For example, how do you interact with customers? How do your wait staff talk with someone when they come into a restaurant or hotel and say, I'm gluten-free and I'm going to need you to accommodate that? So that's the idea where the consultancy started. I realized that actually, as an ex-corporate trainer, and I also used to work in customer support and user experience with a software company, I realized I could translate those skills and bring them over to the hospitality and F&B industry and help them to be able to have a framework for how to accommodate those customers.
Is it more costly to lead a gluten-free lifestyle?
Currently, sadly, especially in Thailand or Southeast Asia, it still is, because we're not as far along as places like the United States, the UK, or Europe, where if you walk into any grocery store, there's an extensive gluten-free section. Commonly, we shop in the, section of the grocery store that has things like vegan food, vegetarian, health food. There's imported gluten-free products, but some of them are quite expensive here because of the import cost. You also have some entrepreneurs now creating gluten-free products at affordable prices, but they're usually one-offs just here and there. There's very few options.
You mentioned that gluten is in wheat, so bread obviously is a no-no. Can you get gluten-free bread? It may be a stupid question, I've never looked for it. Is that available?
It is available, and at one point I was even running a gluten-free bakery, baking gluten-free cookies, trying to recreate my favorite bakery and pastry items like gingerbread. I baked a lot of gingerbread for sale because I think it's some of the things that we miss. So the plight of gluten-free folk is we miss a lot of foods. I actually learned to cook many things like Japanese curry, gyoza, the gingerbread, gluten-free, because I hadn't had them in years. And I knew that a lot of my friends hadn't as well. So I started experimenting with recipes. And so then I started cooking these items. Because you see, when you go on Grab, for example, there's very little that's gluten-free. I envy the people who can order, a cheap McDonald's set. All those deals, they're not accessible to me. If I want to buy gluten-free pizza, I have to pay at least 600 baht for a gluten-free pizza. It's, there's no 199 buy one, get one free for us. So that's where the consultancy comes in. I want entrepreneurs to be able to create gluten-free food more easily because yes, you can create gluten-free bread. You can create gluten-free dumpling wrappers. It just requires a little bit of mixing and matching flours that are non-gluten flours to get the right texture, and then adding some things that will be binders, because the hardest thing when you're trying to recreate a pastry to be gluten-free is that you're not going to have that elasticity or stickiness that comes from gluten, and gluten treats are typically very crumbly. That's where you have to experiment to find the right texture.
And the trend is that more and more people are becoming gluten intolerant. 50 years ago, I'd never heard of gluten and people weren't talking about it. Why now? Why are people becoming gluten intolerant?
Right, that is a great question. It's been addressed multiple times here and there. To be honest, there's a lot of different theories. I don't think that there's one theory to explain everything, but some possible causes that have been listed have been, for example, GMOs, genetic modification of grains. The wheat that we're consuming today is very different from what it was thousands of years ago, for example. And then also pesticides used in grains could be triggering inflammatory responses in the bodies of certain people. And yes, more and more people are becoming gluten intolerant. And on the flip side, the other problem is that wheat is being added to more and more foods. Like if I asked you, David, if Thai cuisine has wheat, what would you say?
No, it doesn't.
Right. Your first thought would be it's rice-based.
Yes.
But actually, today, in the world of processed foods, where everything is bottled, it's canned, it's packaged, wheat is used as a fermenter for soy sauce. It's used as a binder for seasoning powders like roti or canola. It's also used as a texturizer. Maybe when you buy a crunchy snack in 7-Eleven, for example, and it's coated with different powders, and those are to make the chips tasty, wheat is in that too. So it's the issue that wheat is being added to more and more things because today it's so widely available. It's probably one of the most produced grains in the world. And anything that's cheap and widely available, people reach out to add it, whether to, pad their food, as inflation and costs rise, or else just to, like I said, create texture, bind it. So people who come to Thailand would be surprised to find out that actually Thai cuisines is one of the hardest to navigate when you're gluten-free. There's soy sauce, oyster sauce, mushroom sauce, and everything.
Wow, and they all have gluten derivatives in them.
That's correct.
I'm surprised at that.
That's
Oh my goodness. So for a hotel or restaurant that offered gluten-free options, they have an opportunity of an extra audience to bring business into their hotel and restaurants then.
That's exactly right, because sometimes as a gluten-free traveler, and I've seen many others do the same, if I'm traveling in a different country, I'll just go through Google Maps and I'll search for the word gluten-free and see which restaurants have good reviews and we're able to do gluten-free. We refer people who do a good job as well to others in the community. You wouldn't believe where my gluten-free group has been referred. I ask people when they join the group to answer a few questions. We've been referred on Reddit, other gluten-free communities around the world, from places as far as Ireland, Australia. People are coming to us through so many different channels and other support groups around the world for gluten-free individuals. And that's where I say there is a real opportunity for hotels and F&B owners here to build a reputation where they know how to handle gluten-free. Those people will be your loyal customers and they will go on to recommend you in other groups around the world.
And the hub of your community then, you say, is on Facebook?
That's right. That's correct. So currently we have a group of over 2,000 members on Facebook, and it's a private group where we recommend where you can find gluten-free groceries, gluten-free treats. Maybe someone misses croissants, and people in the group know where to find it here in Bangkok or other places in Thailand. That's what's happening in the group.
Do you have a website for your commercial side of consulting for hotels and restaurants?
That's currently in development. I'm launching a program for F&B entrepreneurs and hotels that want to start to accommodate gluten-free folk. A lot of people don't realize that in order to cook gluten-free, it's not that hard. I would say gluten-free pastries are a little bit harder because that's where you're trying to eliminate the crumbliness and create, a similar texture. That's harder when you take out the gluten. But in terms of cooking, sometimes it's as simple as only using pepper and salt, washing the pans if they've been cross-contaminated with anything that has wheat, and cooking in a separate area than anywhere that might have, bits or particles of flour in the air. So you can easily accommodate your gluten-free customers by cooking for them separately in different utensils and then using just salt, pepper, sugar to season your food. And a lot of it is going to be safe for them. And I want to help entrepreneurs to be able to have frameworks both for their wait staff to first, identify what is the allergy, and then even to protect themselves, you can write in the menu, for example, this is what we can and what we can't do, so that legally you're protected. And then the customer knows how much risk they're taking on. And then finally, to also educate the chefs at the back. This is a quick gluten-free alternative or fix that you can have on your menu. If someone comes in, you could offer that to the customer.
Really interesting. Now, you were not born as gluten intolerant. You've inherited this as you've gone through life, and at one point you became gluten intolerant. What about other members in your family? Do you have other gluten intolerant members of the family, or is it just you?
That's an interesting question. I've had other members say they're sensitive to gluten, but no one has an intolerance like I do. So it's actually a very interesting question. It is passed on genetically as far as we know, especially the most extreme form, which is celiac disease, which can be tested through the genetics. If you have the gene identifier for celiac, then you're considered celiac. So basically, for people who are celiac, and that's the most extreme form, they can't consume gluten at all because it damages their stomach lining. And if they continue to force themselves to have gluten, eventually they can develop stomach cancer later in their lives. And for people who are gluten intolerant like me, we have quite extreme reactions, even if there's no genetic link that's been proven yet. So for example, if I consume gluten, I'll be, out of commission for a few days. I will get stomach aches, I'll be bedridden, I won't be able to do things as normal. And the issue is that sometimes, for a lot of people, and like for myself, when you discover you're gluten intolerant, it's because your body has hit some kind of a limit. You may have already had the sensitivity and not known and kept consuming it and eating it normally, or avoiding it a little bit here and there, but still eating it, and then you hit some kind of a threshold. Now I can't have gluten at all. So if there's even a particle or a drop of soy sauce in my food, that can trigger stomach aches or that can trigger a reaction. I do not know how bad it will be. It's quite unpredictable. That is why we're so careful. And that's why you have a lot of people who are celiac. They say, please don't put our bread on the same plate as gluten bread, because we could get a reaction from that contamination. And that's where I want to educate people, because I've seen a lot of Thai entrepreneurs, and I've even experienced this myself. Sometimes they don't even want to serve you because they're afraid that if they do something wrong, you'll end up in the hospital. And I want to explain that it's not that difficult. It can be done. And to know your limits and communicate those to your customers as well.
If somebody wanted to have a test to find out if they were sensitive to gluten, do hospitals offer some form of test in Thailand?
Yes, they do. So I did mine at Bumrungrad. They do have a lot of different tests to help define whether you're, having sensitivities to gluten. But in terms of the genetic testing, it's not so advanced yet. They found links for people who are celiac, like they found a celiac gene. But when you talk about gluten allergy, gluten intolerance, it's not yet readily identifiable if it's something, that's inherited or not.
And finally, what trends do you see in gluten-free lifestyle in Thailand and worldwide?
Right. I think what's really important, especially for the Thai hospitality and F&B industry, we talk a lot in the industry about elevating our tourism industry to be on par with the rest of the world. And I think we're usually talking about places where infrastructures are quite developed, like in the West, the US, Europe, Australia, where there are lots of options for people, and particularly gluten-free options. I think that if Thai F&B entrepreneurs and hotels were to pick up on accommodating people who have food allergies, it will really help to elevate the industry as a whole. The reason is that it's just as you said, more and more people are developing gluten intolerance or finding that when they don't consume gluten, they feel a lot better. They feel more energetic. And when you go to the United States or to Europe, there are just so many options, and here it's still quite limited. I think it's going to become a standard eventually for the tourism industry. And so for F&B entrepreneurs who hop onto this early in this region, you're actually setting, you're helping to benchmark and set a sort of standard for the whole industry going forward. And so that's why I think it's something that we need to pay attention to. If you can believe it, my group, which is the English group, is about 2,000 people. but the Thai group is around 8,000. The first person that I found who was gluten intolerant was actually a Thai person. After I discovered my own intolerance and I was, talking with friends, it was a Thai friend. And I have quite a few Thai friends who are also gluten intolerant. So it's not something that's just in the West, for example. It's already happening here right now. And I also think that from a sustainability angle, the world has pushed and created a lot of products that are pushed to be more and more widely available, cheaper and cheaper, and a lot of times the quality is not there, and there are things in those foods that are not sustainable for human individuals. I'm allergic to a lot of things, and sometimes I joke that I think I'm just allergic to the modern lifestyle. I don't think that it's really compatible with human beings, and we need to pay attention to that. We can't continue to push the economies of scale and say, we need to have more and more and more of this product. Eventually, there's going to be backlash from the human body, from people like me that no longer can tolerate eating normally like other people. And sometimes it can really just make someone's day when you're someone gluten intolerant like me. The other day I was operating an event, and at the end of it I was cleaning up, and it was a food market, and I was starving because there were only a few options, and I had not had time to pack some food for myself. But there was a friend of mine who was also having a booth there. She used to be a hotel chef. Now she's opened a restaurant. And I said, I'm going to have your salad. And she looked at me and she said, you know what? We actually have a gluten-free vegan burger patty. We can add that for you. We'll just do it special for you. And I almost cried at that moment because I was so hungry, and we're always short on protein and carbs. If you talk to people who are gluten intolerant, and I've even met people, other travel industry professionals, randomly at travel events, who came to me and said, your community has helped me so much. I'm always hungry, and sometimes I just don't know where to go. In the spur of the moment, maybe you didn't have time to pack some food, and to have the options there helps so much. And for me, it's the same when I go somewhere and someone is willing to just go a little bit of the extra mile to make something I can eat and it's filling. Maybe it contains some carbs and protein that are gluten-free. I am forever grateful, and that is the experience of our entire community.
And keep up the great work in promoting gluten-free solutions for this lifestyle that many of us are having to adopt. Thank you for coming along today and sharing your story with Trends. And thank you for watching this latest episode and tasty episode of Trends. See you next Friday.